And, you know, listening to this law enforcement trainer saying that Adrian Gonzales went through this 40 hours of training, and that officers in this training are essentially trained to go against the original training, which is generally you wait for backup, but they're trained, you go towards the gunfire, you don't wait in an active shooter situation. Terry, when you listen to that, what is that having an impact?
It could. I think they're going to take him on what's called voir dire. I think the defense is going to ask him some questions outside the presence of the jury.
I can see why that's a concern, but there's the purpose of introducing multiple photographs was just to show, because he's in different clothing, that he did participate in each one of them. I think that there's one that's obvious. 919, I would withdraw. And 917.
All we're really asking is just
to edit it out,
black marker over the thing, so it's not.
I can.
Yeah, but let's go ahead and over the lunch recess, go ahead and redact what's displayed on the cap.
Yes, sir.
And then tender it to them to see if they're satisfied with that.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, we'll be in recess till 1:30.
Oh, okay, so now they really are going to
Yeah,
watch.
right.
Okay.
They're looking at some pictures or something.
Yeah, I think, well, they're getting stuff organized for after we get back from lunch. But so we've been listening to this testimony, and what do you think?
Well, he used some powerful words. He says you cannot sit around and wait. You don't wait for backup, which is part of the state's point.
Yeah.
You have to stop the killing.
Right.
And he says for training purposes, you have to make a move. And so he made some, powerful, he had powerful comments, but we haven't heard examination on him. But, I don't know. Maybe it is making the state's case that according to this trainer, according to this gentleman with these credentials, he is an expert. He's supposedly, because we heard him testify outside the presence of the jury earlier. The first thing we heard, they are not going to allow him to render an opinion on Adrian Gonzales's actions. He's just setting.
He's setting the stage.
Yeah, he's setting the stage. He's proving the point of the prosecutors that say it doesn't matter if you can see him. It doesn't matter. You hear the gunfire. You know basically where it is. You go. You have to stop the killing.
Look at the defense argue. Look, he drives up onto the school.
Yeah.
He's all the way up there. He's headed. Is there an argument to be made that he did head towards the gunfire? Maybe he didn't head towards the gunfire in the way that you would have liked him to head towards the gunfire, but those become judgment calls, right?
And he did. He ran around that side of the building,
And goes in.
And goes in. So he was headed.
Once the backup gets there.
Well, and one of the things that they said is, but you don't do this with reckless abandonment. He says, and the witness says, yes, but I know that I'm going to be in a lot of danger, and I'm still going to run towards the gunfire. That's what this witness would have done.
Right.
But that's hard to say. I mean, it's easy to say
That's
that.
what he says
now.
he would have done.
Yeah, and and it's interesting because we were talking earlier. We have seen situations where officers have run into that fatal funnel.
Yes.
They have run towards the danger. July 7th here in Dallas is a perfect example, and 3 Dallas police officers did die running courageously towards that gunfire.
Right.
And so there are officers that will do that, and that is what they're trained to do: go and stop the threat. I mean, Brett Thompson died because he was trying to engage the shooter, and so. But it's hard to say in this situation, if the jury's going to believe that that's what Adrian Gonzales should have done.
Well, and based on that incident, a horrible thing in downtown Dallas, I'm wondering if there is someone who has a different perspective on running into the fatal funnel, and what officers should do to, like, the cover or the concealment, or take precaution. As they have said over and over again, a dead officer is a useless officer, and plus now we have a dead officer on our hands.
Well, and I also think that the testimony we heard from Melody Flores is really going to be important because, she again is the only person who encountered, in that initial few moments encounters Adrian Gonzales, and it's not that he's doing nothing, and so, and then of course there's just all the kind of discrepancies, I guess, because the memory's a funny thing.
Right.
In her testimony, did he have decals on the card? And
Right.
he did, and she
Did he have a
remembers he
beard?
didn't. Did he have
Full
a beard?
beard.
I mean, all these things, and so it feels like reasonable doubt, right? Because it's like because we're getting into judgment calls, right? And
Yes.
and so I think it's just a hard one.
And the licensed professional counselor who testified previously, she verified the trauma response that you have immediately, and how your brain changes. You go into the fight, flight, or freeze mode, and it changes everything. We have, for most people, we have our basic instinct is to survive.
Yeah.
And so these officers are trained to survive and yet do their job and yet run to the danger and yet protect us from the danger. But they're also trained to survive. And as human beings, we want to try to survive. So there are things that you have to do to ensure that. And that's just why, like when they were waiting for the shields.
Yeah.
They, it's because they need to survive. It's not great that they didn't have them for 77 minutes.
Right.
They waited way too long, obviously.
Way.
During jury selection, they do say at the end, the prosecutors told the potential jurors, the question you're going to have to ask yourself, that's going to, and because one of the jurors said, potential jurors asked, can we disregard that? But he said, you are going to have to answer the question, what would a reasonable police officer have done in that situation? And that's the question. And he's like, well, what would a reasonable police officer, because that's what you're going to have to decide as a juror. What would a reasonable police officer, not me or you, you and I don't have to run into that school, as a trained officer would. So the question is, if you believe that a reasonable police officer still would have gone through that door with a shooter on the other side, shooting at you, would a reasonable officer do that?
And it's none of this is easy, so don't misunderstand my words. But in retrospect, you might say, I don't care. I don't care what's going on. I'm going in there, right? But at the time, they didn't know what they were dealing with. We've heard testimony where I've seen interview footage with some of these officers where they have said, we didn't even know students were in the room because it was so dark in there that it was so quiet. We thought, we knew it was awards day, or we knew there was something special going on that day. We didn't know if they were in a different part of the school. We didn't know. They didn't know. Now, you hear the 911 tapes. You can hear the rounds going off.
Right.
You can presume.
And
a
that
lot
surveillance
of things.
footage is
That's right. And you can presume, no, they're probably, he wouldn't be shooting at a blank wall.
Right.
He
Well-
wouldn't be shooting at a desk. He's shooting at someone. So you can presume that there are children in that room.
Let me ask you this. So obviously this morning we also heard testimony from, of course, the PTSD counselor. We also heard, testimony from the doctor talking about the children that were wounded, and that was the point when Adrian Gonzales clearly became emotional about what he was hearing. I mean, that it was pretty clear to me. And then also, we heard the mother. But at a certain point, do those things backfire?
Oh.
I mean, is it too much? You know what I mean? Like, because again, ultimately, you got to prove the case against Adrian Gonzales.
Right.
And so, does it start to feel like a pile-on?
I think it can. I definitely think it can. I think you have to be careful not to wring out the jury too much, because I think you can. I have nothing to base this statement on except for that, the district attorney who's bringing this case against Adrian Gonzales, she lives there.
Yes, she lives in Uvalde.
She lives in that county. She knows these people. She it is, could this, and again, total speculation, could they be putting on some of this testimony to, in a way to not validate?
Is it to maybe to assuage? Like
Or-
in other words, like you think it may be that they're trying to? I mean, because obviously the families have been pretty upset with the prosecutors.
Right.
Is it also maybe aimed at the families? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. That's
To
an
give
interesting
them the
question.
case that
like
they
clo-
didn't get.
like closure.
Because they couldn't
Exactly.
take the
Exactly.
killer to trial.
Right.
So they're giving them the trial that they would have tried for the shooter. rather-
because some of this,
And it does feel like that at times, and
Yeah.
you're trying a murder case.
Well,
Yes.
right, because some of it's like, wait a minute, the shooter in this case is not on trial. It's
Right.
Adrian Gonzales, and
Right.
he didn't shoot anybody,
Right.
and he didn't kill anybody. You know, it's and as they kept calling the shooter, the monster, the animal. I mean, clearly trying to differentiate. So that it's just
It could be a sense that I'm going to honor your pain.
Yeah.
I'm going to honor your loss, and I'm not going to just give a very dry, he did this, and this. Okay, we're asking you to find him guilty. They are honoring them by bringing in a mom to describe her daughter and lifelong injury. It could be. I don't know, but it could be.
It also feels like they're traumatizing, though, some of the people. And it feels like the prosecution is not very warm towards the witnesses versus when you hear LaHood say, thank you so much. We thank you for what you do. Thank you for, we hope that your daughter, the survivor, that you have many, blessed years with her. And the way he's speaking to them and the way he's letting the jury know, like, it just feels very compassionate. I feel like he's scoring a lot of points with the jury because of that.
Well, I do too, but I have noticed that they will mention, I've never spoken to you before. You've never talked to us. You've
Right.
never talked to the defense before. But they have spoken to the prosecutors. At that time, maybe the prosecutor said, I'm really sorry what's going
Right.
on.
Could.
So they could have done that, but what they're missing is the opportunity to show 12 people
Right.
their compassion, because the defense is definitely doing that.
well, and we have to also, and I don't really know anything about the prosecution team. Have they tried a case of this magnitude? I mean,
Oh.
that's a, because
Valid.
Nico
Yeah.
LaHood was, the Bexar County District Attorney, and all these things start to play into it. You're also trying a case that's being televised.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
being live streamed. I mean, all those things
Valid.
play into, and so I don't know. I mean, it's hard to, it could also just be their bedside manner. I mean,
Could be.
some people have good bedside manner, and some
Yeah.
people don't have such great bedside manner. Okay, folks, we're going to also take a lunch break. We will be back around 1:15. If you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'd be happy to answer them, or you can email me at teiserer@wfaa.com. And thank you so much, Terry, and thank you so much, Rebecca. We look forward to more discussion and seeing where we go this afternoon.